Today we're just outside of Tulsa, and joining me is Deiter Rudolph with the Oklahoma Forestry Services. And you probably have heard a lot about the emerald ash borer, and we're going to get it straight from the experts. Tell us what's going on and what's the concern around Tulsa.
Yeah, so emerald ash borer is a invasive beetle. Started in Eastern Asia, and it came to North America about 20-ish years ago. And so the problem with it is it's killing our ash trees. So big problem is with invasives, our trees aren't used to it, and so they have no defense. So it's able to get in and do the damage that normally a tree would defend itself from.
Right. So when did this start, and where did it start in the U.S.?
Yeah, so we first found it in early 2000s in Detroit area.
Okay.
And it's estimated it was here in the early 90s, came across in packaging materials, just crates, any type of wood that was used for moving stuff.
Yeah.
It emerged from that wood, went into the trees, and it just kind of spread from there. And so before we even really knew it was a problem, it was already working its way across the Midwest.
Okay.
And so over time, it's just continued to spread.
And it's been all around Oklahoma
It
for a
has.
number of years, right?
Yeah, and we found it in Oklahoma, like in 2016. Nothing ever happened with that find, but it's been in Arkansas, Texas, Missouri, and really all of the eastern states. It's just kind of started in that Detroit area and just went out, and it just spread in about as many directions as it could.
So why is this so bad for ash trees? Of course we love ash trees.
Yeah,
right?
we love ash trees. It was a great tree. It's great for basically yards, streets, everything. It handles a lot of our soils. It handles drought. So it was just a really good tree, and it actually looked really pretty. So a lot of people like to plant it. Now, the reason they started planting it really heavily was around the 60s or so. We had a lot of elms lining our streets. Dutch elm disease came in, wiped out the elms. And so the next thing we did was, okay, well, let's plant the next best street tree. Let's plant ash. Planted a whole bunch of ash. There's a lot of like beautiful pictures of, streets lined with ash trees. And then now those trees are gone. The streets are bare. The sun's just hitting it. We lost a lot of shade. We lost a lot of just the prettiness of our streets. And all that was because another pest came in that focused on one species.
And cities have learned their lesson, I think, now that we're not doing monoculture, monocrops of trees anymore.
Yeah, so now a lot of cities, when they're planning, they really put a lot of thought in not just what the street's going to look like now, but what it's going to look like in 50 years type of thing. So they make rules where they'll say, we won't plant more than, say, 10% of one species. And so that way, if something like this happens again, they won't have a large, die-off of all their trees. It'll just be a portion. And so they'll always have some canopy cover.
Okay, so let's talk about the emerald ash borer,
Yeah.
sometimes abbreviated EAB.
EAB, yeah.
Let's talk about that insect and exactly what it's doing to the tree.
So what it's doing is, so the beetle, it's a little beetle, fits on a penny. Its name is really accurate because it's emerald color. We call them jewel beetles because of that. And it bores into the wood of ash trees. So what it's doing is the adult will go and lay its eggs on the outside of the tree. In the bark. And these eggs are tiny, really hard to see. They're also camouflaged. They look like bark. The egg hatches, the larva goes into the tree. Once it's past that bark, it's into the part of the tree that's moving water and nutrients up and down. Basically, it's like the vascular tissue.
Yeah, that cambium.
The cambium, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's where there's water, there's sugars, there's nutrients, everything that the leaves produce going down, everything that the roots pull up going up. So it's just really nutritious for these bugs. So they'll eat in there. And the way they feed, emerald ash borer will always feed in a S-shaped gallery. So it's like switchbacks.
Okay.
A lot of our native bugs will kind of just meander, but this always has that pattern. And eventually it's stopping the flow of all these nutrients and water. One bug, not going to cause an issue. Trees are big, bugs are small. But with the emerald ash borer, what it's doing is it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It just overwhelms the tree. There's too many beetles, too many larvae. And eventually the tree just cannot move enough of that food up and down to be able to live. And eventually the tree starts to decline and then die.
And some of our native borers will do that similar thing, but they're in much smaller quantity,
Yeah.
right? And they're kind of going to stress trees already, whereas
Yeah.
this is attacking.
So our native things, native trees, native borers, they evolve together. They belong together. So the trees have ways to defend themselves against diseases and pests that it's used to. Once the tree starts getting stressed, it gets weaker and it can't defend itself. So that's when we see a lot of our native borers come in, or native diseases. So if you see a tree filled with holes, it doesn't mean it's emerald ash borer, but it means it could be. But if the tree was already, if we knew that that tree's always been declined, it's always been a little sickly, more likely it's just our native bugs hurrying up the death of a tree, which in nature would be basically it's replacing that tree quicker so something new could take its place.
Right.
Now, yard, we don't necessarily want that nature element where it's killing a tree faster, but that's kind of the role of these native bugs. But the emerald ash borer, it doesn't care if the tree's healthy or sick. It sees an ash and it just sees a buffet.
So where will we identify most of those adults? Are they high up in the canopy, or are they down low?
Yeah.
Or are they crawling up the tree?
The adults, we can't ever really see the adults. I mean, they can be found, but they're small, they're green, and they're in the leaves. So trees, this is an ash tree behind me. It's a tall tree. You can't see a little bug up at it.
Okay.
So we rarely see the adults. It's usually the signs of the infestation that we see. But the adult will be happy spending its time up there eating leaves. It doesn't eat a lot of the leaf. It really doesn't cause any damage in the adult stage.
Okay.
It's all when it's that larva under the bark.
So what are the symptoms that we're looking for?
Yeah, so the initial symptoms, the early signs are going to be normal symptoms of stressed tree. And it's because, all the water nutrient flow is disrupted. So the tree's going to start being stressed. One of the things we look at is dieback. So the tree behind me, we've got some dieback in the top. And if you think about where the sun's hitting, what's the most productive leaves on the tree, it's going to be the top ones. So if the top's dying back, that's a bad sign. Now, if you've got dieback at the bottom, that might just be the trees, it's not a good branch, the tree's losing it. But if those upper branches are dying, that's usually a sign that something's happening. Another response of trees whenever something is happening, whenever there's stressor, is what we call epicormic sprouting. It's leaves coming out of places that shouldn't be. So it might be the main stem, it might be some of those big branches, and it gives the tree kind of a bushy appearance. And that's the tree's response of something's wrong, I need to produce more sugar, I need to produce more food. The problem is those leaves aren't always in the best spot, and the way the branches come out or the twigs come out, it's not very strong, so it's easy to break apart in the wind or in ice storms. So it's not great for the tree, but it's the tree's oh no type of thing.
Okay, so the tree's under stress.
The tree's
But
under
the
stress.
telltale sign.
The only real sign is if we could find that exit hole and we could find that gallery, or we find the beetle itself. So Oklahoma Forestry Services, we'll put up traps across the state. That's basically a big gluey box hanging in ash trees, and the beetles hit it. We check the traps, and that's how we found most of the other counties. Wagner County, we actually found a beetle on a leaf. But for the most part, it's our trapping programs. And then once we're starting to see that, we see these other signs of decline. And so then we're able to tell it's here. We knew that from the traps, but now we know how far the spread has been.
Okay, well, and I know woodpeckers a lot of times will go after borers.
Yeah.
Are woodpeckers going after this? Is that a
Yes.
telltale sign?
Woodpeckers love emerald ash borer.
Okay, great.
Because there's so many of these larvae in there. As they're getting older, those larvae, they get big, so it's a really juicy meal for the woodpeckers.
Okay.
So they will go to a tree and they'll start kind of going into the wood and finding it. Now, when they're moving up and down that tree, they're scraping off the bark. So this is what we call blonding. And it's basically removing the outer part of the bark, so it's just that really tight part to the tree. That doesn't hurt the tree, but it changes the color and the appearance, and it's something that you could really spot from a distance, because it's just you see gray tree and then all of a sudden something different on it.
Okay, so it's sort of like that bronze sculpture that's been
Yes.
designed by a red
Yeah,
touching
basically you
it.
keep rubbing it and
Yeah.
eventually it changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just a sign that woodpeckers have maybe been there, and there might be a borer infestation
Yeah.
inside of that.
Now with that one, unlike our native borers, if we've got a bunch of native borers that's going to attract that many woodpeckers, you usually see the decline in the tree.
Okay.
But emerald ash borer, the tree sometimes declines slower, so that might be one of the biggest indicators of the tree canopy looks great, but there's a lot of woodpecker activity. That's a huge sign for emerald ash borer.
Okay.
But it is all dependent on the birds being there. It doesn't always happen.
Right. So what's the exit hole look like that we're looking for?
Yeah, so the exit hole, it's tiny. It's 1/8 of an inch, and we say it's D-shaped. So it will have a really straight line and then the curve.
Okay.
Now, the bugs, they don't really obey gravity like we think of it. They might come upside down, right side up, so that D could be facing any direction.
Okay.
But it's really just a small hole in the tree that's got that flat edge.
Okay.
Most of our other native borers that will go into an ash tree, it's either a perfect circle or kind of an oval, and they're usually bigger. Like if you could fit a pencil in it, it's going to be a native borer, because the emerald ash borer, like I said, 1/8 of an inch, real small.
And so then they pupate and turn into the adults and they fly away? And
Yeah.
that's how we keep this process going and this problem
And
going?
then it starts over. And they're really good flyers.
Okay.
So they're actually able to spread a decent distance on their own. But the biggest thing that got them to spread was a movement of firewood. Trees died, landowners cut it down, and they moved it to go camping. They left a little bit of wood for their next camper, being nice. the bug emerged, it got a free trip. So that's one of our big takeaway messages. This bug, since it is a decent flyer, was always going to spread on its own, but at a much slower rate.
All right. Well, what are some methods of control if the homeowner's concerned about it? I mean, is there a control, or do we just have to remove the tree if we find it?
There's a little control. It's a lot of how much the landowner wants to do. So sometimes landowners are just accepting that their tree is going to die. Sometimes they want to hurry it up and cut it down, put something new in its place. There are chemical treatments. So there's what's called a ground drench, which is basically pouring the chemical around the ground. The tree roots take it up, and it makes the tree poisonous to the beetle. Now, it's not going to fix the damage, but it will prevent more damage. Now, that ground drench, only moderately effective, but it's also real cheap. You could get the chemical at any box store and apply it yourself.
Okay.
More effective treatment is called injections, where you basically put that chemical directly into the tree. Because you're putting it right in, all of it's getting into the tree, it's going a lot quicker. Downside of that is you have to have specialized equipment and a what's called an applicator's license. Okay. So you really have to hire someone to do that, so it's a little more expensive. But that works for about 3 years.
Right. And what is the Forestry Service, both you guys and nationally, what are y'all doing to control this on a bigger scale?
So the first step is always just messaging of know what to look for and the don't move firewood message. But when it's in an area, what we've started doing is what's called biocontrol. We started looking in the emerald ash borer's native range to what is its predator. Found some parasitic wasps. It found that these 4 species of wasps only go for emerald ash borer. They're not going to target our natives. They're not going to cause an issue on their own. So we're releasing these wasps with the goal that they will start controlling the population. They're never going to get rid of it because that would be mutual destruction. If you get rid of all the emerald ash borer, the wasp has nothing to parasitize. But it brings it into balance. It basically is creating that same balance that our native bugs have.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you guys are on the case and we're getting the word out, right?
Yeah.
So should anybody who has a concern, should they contact you guys or?
Yeah. Our goal, Oklahoma Forestry Services, is we're here to help landowners with their trees. So if any landowner ever has a question, they could reach out, they could contact us, contact OSU Extensions. These are all people who they work with trees, they work with landowners, and between us, we're able to find the best person for what their need is.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, Deiter.
We hope you enjoyed this video as part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on the OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.